This is my interpersonal communication project for HSCO 508 at Liberty University. Did you know that 70% of our day is spent in verbal conversation? 40% of that is listening, but only 25% of that is effective listening. So what I would ask of you today is to be an effective listener and stay with me as I do my presentation so you can learn a little bit about what I learned from this class and about myself. Next slide. To introduce myself, I am Gloria Ptasnik. I reside in the Midwest. I got my undergrad degree at UNO, which is here in Omaha, in English, and I'm now pursuing my master's degree in Human Services, Trauma and Crisis Counseling at Liberty University. My future plans are to do hospice or suicide counseling. I'd like to work in a hospice setting, possibly a hospital or a shelter, Salvation Army, or maybe Boys Town, which is located right here in Omaha. Next slide. So to do a little summary of my project, we're going to discuss my background and my behavioral blend, what is interpersonal conversation, enlarging the conversation, communication barriers, my overarching goal, my resources and strategies, my action plan, and my conclusion. Next slide. So my background influences, because your background does influence how you communicate. I grew up in a home where children were to be seen and not heard. My father was the head of the household, and you never disagreed with him. I was very passive, I was very shy, and we had a lot of conflict in the home. So I pretty much thought that conflict was communicating until I got older and moved out of the home and became a professional, had a career, had a new respect for others. I began to communicate on a different level. I joined some task groups and church groups which helped me to communicate, and I became more aggressive. I also had a marriage and a divorce, which I learned from those failures. So all of these things helped me, and I've always had a desire to learn how to communicate better. Next slide. During this class we took a personality test so that we could know what our personality was and our behavior blend. This is based on a DISC, D-I-S-C chart, and the D stands for active, task-oriented, the I is active, people-oriented, the C is passive, task-oriented, and the S stands for passive, people-oriented. I am an ISC personality, which I'll explain on the next chart, please, or the next slide. My behavior blend, I actually am passive. I don't like conflict, so I try to avoid conflict whenever necessary. I can be critical, so sometimes I convey the wrong idea when I'm communicating. I need to be more decisive and direct because I speak with my emotions a lot. I am people-oriented. I can adjust. I can be reserved or outgoing, whichever the case might be. But I like harmony, and I do worry too much about how others perceive me when I'm trying to communicate with them. So some of these are barriers that I need to overcome. Next slide. What is interpersonal communication? According to Stewart 2012, it's the quality of contact when two or more people listen and speak to maximize the conversation. Speaking is actually also referred to as exhaling. You're actually saying something, something's coming out of your mouth, you're exhaling. It's being open and honest, and the intent is for people to perceive you as you perceive yourself. There's two different types of speaking. You can speak on a level 1, which is basically factual. I'm okay, you're okay. Or a level 2, which is deeper than words. It's more emotions. It's more, you begin to trust each other. And you're a safe person to talk to. And the other part of interpersonal communication is listening. So with the exhaling, listening is also inhaling. You're taking in something. There's level 1, 2, and 3. We all want to be at a level 1, but we're not always at a level 1. That's where we listen very actively and intensely. Level 2 is where you're hearing, but you're not really listening. You're probably listening with one ear and not two. Level 3, you're kind of in and out of the conversation. But you actually need to seek to develop understanding between each other. That is what interpersonal conversation is. According to Valenti and Rocket 2008, there can be conflict in interpersonal conversation, or rifts as they call them, but conflict can actually be positive. It can be, I hear you, but I have a different opinion, which is okay, because that fosters presence, and it also can help to enlarge the conversation which is what we're going to talk about next. So next slide, please. Enlarging the conversation, what does that mean? It's the EMC equation, which is identifying needs, and intentional resourcing, which is enlarging the conversation. You actually listen to others, listen to their perspectives, you consider new avenues, new ideas, you want to explore them, you actually enlarge the conversation. And it's dialogue. And according to Peterson, 2015, dialogue is an act of love, which, can think about it, when you are talking to someone and actually sharing ideas, you're actually caring about that person. So it is an act of love. It's empathetic listening, being open to others and not concentrate on me, but concentrate on us and what's happening between us as a conversation. You explore and exchange ideas, and as Scott says, the conversation is the relationship. One thing to remember is communication is always continuous, it's simultaneous, and it sometimes can be complicated. And as Thompson 2008 says, conflict happens a lot in relationships, and that's a lot of times why friendships and marriages fail. So it's important to know your communicative style and to be able to communicate with each other so you don't have these failures. Next slide. Communication barriers, some of those are biased listening, where you're flat-brained, you're just not listening at all. Self-disclosure, you don't want to disclose too much about yourself too soon or too little, or disclose anything from the past that's not pertinent to the present. Don't let your emotions get in the way. Sometimes semantics, the way that you hear a word or say a word, is a different meaning to someone else. You might have external distractions such as noises or smells. Internally, you might be fatigued, or you might be daydreaming, or there are nonverbal cues such as daydreaming or somebody yawning or not making eye contact. So those are all barriers to communication. Next slide is my overarching goal is to enlarge the conversation. I want to become a better listener, to not interrupt, to disclose only what's necessary, to decrease conflict in my personal life, and I want to have a better communication and be closer to God. Next slide. My resources and strategies, one of the resources I'm going to use is this Talker Listener card that was in Peterson's 2015 Why Don't We Listen Better book. It's got the talker on one side, the listener on the other, and it tells the goals that you need to do as both the listener and the talker. So I'm going to be using this as a tool as I proceed to better myself as a communicator. Also, Peterson 2015 had some good techniques that I'm going to refer back to. Some of the strategies, I'm going to be a better empathetic listener, I'm going to be aware of my pitfalls, I'm going to attend some seminars about communication, I will join a church group, because we do have some church groups at my church, which help you communicate better, and I'm going to practice. Next slide, please. My action plan, putting the action plan together, is I'm going to use the information from this class. I'll do more research as I become a counselor, and I need to ask questions and clarify. Sometimes if you don't do that, there's a misunderstanding between your communication. I don't want to be biased, and I'm going to try to walk in their shoes as Jesus did. I like the word agape, meaning love from the Bible, being acceptable, being non-judgmental, and that's what I want to do. I want to walk in the same way that Jesus did when he was communicating with people. Next slide, please. My conclusion, I like the quote from Peterson that says you can't be human alone, which is true. You need communication. You need to have that other human with you. That humanness is what I call it. You know, being able to communicate with someone. And from the Bible, from the New International Version of the Bible, I like Ephesians 4:29, which says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." I truly believe that, and I believe that change begins with me. And if I follow God's word and act like him and be better in my communication relationships with my friends, my family, and my co-workers, I will help to enlarge the conversation. So thank you for spending your time with me today, and God bless.